So we're going to go ahead and get started with our workplace webinar today. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the retirement plan provider and what are your liabilities. Today our presenter is Catherine Connors with AXA Advisors, and I'll introduce her momentarily. The Workplace Excellence webinar is an exciting new program that extra helps clients and colleagues to manage workforce changes and increase workforce efficiency. We've been doing these since November, and it's been a pretty attractive thing for our business, just to provide our clients free, useful information. The call will last about 1 hour today, and you are in listen-only mode. If you do have questions, there's a question function at the bottom of your toolbar that you can ask questions, and I can present those at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. Today our presenter is Catherine Connors with AXA Advisors. And I will let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about where she got started.
Erin, thank you so much, and thank you for all of you attendees that we have with us today. Thank you for your time, carving time out of your busy day. As Erin said, my name is Kathy Connors. I'm an advisor with AXA Advisors, and I've been with AXA Advisors for about 1.5 years. And have been working with retirement plans for the past, about 4 to 5 years. Before that, worked primarily with individuals in wealth planning. I'm very much drawn to and enjoy working with the retirement plans because for so many individuals, this benefit is square one for their savings for retirement. You individuals out there are the ones that are providing this benefit to your workforce. So that's an outstanding thing, and I think that it always needs to be treated and conveyed that it is a benefit. So I am going to go ahead and get started. And again, Erin said that we are in listen-only mode, so if you have any questions, please type them in. I do enjoy questions and look forward to getting to those. So we're going to go ahead. Today we're going to be talking about the 7 simple truths that every plan sponsor should know. And this really is a discussion about retirement plan or qualified plan fiduciaries. And right now, I have a question for Erin. Erin, I am going to be flipping through okay, I'm sorry all. So what we're talking about, most plan sponsors are unaware of the many duties that are required of them as a fiduciary. My big question would be, how many plan sponsors realize that they are a fiduciary? A fiduciary within the workplace, a fiduciary attached to a retirement plan, to a 401k plan, is going to be your business owner. It's going to be the executives of your business, the directors within the business, and your administrators. It could be your HR, not consultant, but your HR team. Anybody that has anything to do with the decision-making and the implementation of your 401k plan is a fiduciary to that plan. So what is the most important role or duty of the fiduciary? It's really to select and monitor the 401k plan, as well as to communicate with participants properly and compliantly. Most plan sponsors are unaware, as we stated, and what I am going to do bear with me. Erin, are you seeing my screen? Okay, I am going to tell you guys this. I have a little bit of a technical difficulty. If Erin, who is available, can bear with me, Erin, I am going to request for you to flip through the slides as we go through them, as it seems that my screen has completely lost your screen.
I sure can.
So, Okay, thank you, Erin. I appreciate that. So we have great information today. So we'll get through this little glitch. State of the retirement plan industry. The current state of the retirement plan industry really is transactional. It's product sale model. What that really means is that a lot of companies are sold that off-the-shelf model, that one size fits all for a retirement plan, for the 401k. So it's really a purchase instead of a solve for benefit. And again, if you're taking care of your workforce and you're providing and paying for a 401k plan, you really want to view it, and you want your participants to view it as a solve for benefit. Just to kind of give you a little bit of an update or a warning, the Department of Labor's state of the retirement plan industry focus is going to be, and is currently, retirement preparedness as well as education for the participant. Retirement preparedness is really going to speak to making sure that your workforce and your participants understand and have some handle on what it's going to take for them to get retired. Level of savings you're accumulating in this tool, what do you do with it? How do you get prepared? So that is the true focus for the Department of Labor.
Kathy, which page should we be on?
We should be on State of the Retirement Plan Industry.
Okay.
Okay. And then I'm just going to say page when we're ready. Fiduciary buzzwords misrepresent the seriousness of plan sponsors' fiduciary responsibility. Everybody that is a plan fiduciary they're to be held personally liable for their 401k plan. That's pretty intimidating when you think about it. Have you heard any of the buzzwords? The buzzwords would include fiduciary warranty, a 321 fiduciary, as well as a 338 fiduciary, or those fiduciary liabilities. What does all of this mean? That's a lot of lingo going on, and what we're going to talk about is what that really does mean. Weighed down in complexity and cost. Retirement plans are complex. There are so many features, and again, it's a benefit. So you want to have a handle on all of those features, and if they really are serving you and your participant. Cost. Who on the call can really say that they have a good handle in regards to what the cost should be? What does that mean? What should it look like? Page. So our next page, it doesn't have to be so complicated. By focusing on the right things, you don't have to know everything. Delegation is the key. If you engage with 401k partners that focus on being accessible for you within your 401k, true 401k partners, that helps pull some of that fiduciary liability away from you, the true plan fiduciary. There's power in simplicity. I think that's a pretty universal phrase. And know the 7 truths. The 7 truths is what we're really going to focus on today. So as we move to the next page, we have the 7 simple plan sponsor truths. Number 1 being, it's true, you are a fiduciary. And if anybody has any questions in regards to the status, if they are a fiduciary, you definitely want to take the steps, do the due diligence to find out what your role is if you meet that fiduciary role. Number 2, you can delegate your fiduciary responsibilities. 3, you must understand your plan's fees, all of your plan fees. 4, ask the right questions of your current providers. Benchmark your plan and know how to benchmark. Maintain your investment policy statement. 6, form an investment committee and meet regularly. 7, monitor your plan. These are the items that we're going to discuss today. We're going to move on to the next page. And yes, it's true, you are a fiduciary. This page is pretty intimidating. And ERISA defines a fiduciary as any person that exercises any discretionary authority or discretionary control regarding management of a 401k plan, or exercises any authority or control regarding the management or disposition of the plan assets. I would ask, does this sound like you? Does this sound like something that you are doing in the process of offering a 401k plan? A fiduciary would also render investment advice regarding plan assets for a fee or for other compensation, whether that be direct or indirect. One thing that I would caution there is you may have somebody, let's take the HR director. That individual earns a salary, so they are getting paid. It's commonplace that participants view that individual as their link, as the person to go to for questions regarding the 401k. So you have an HR director or an individual that's getting paid a salary by the company, and they are, just by the nature of their role, asked to give advice from individuals in regards to what they should do with the 401k plan. That might be how much they should be investing. It might be where they should be investing within the plan. But that is really compromising that individual and giving them much more fiduciary liability than they should have. So if you have anybody that you recognize in that description, you really want to tell them to step back from providing that direct instruction to the participant. A fiduciary also has any discretionary authority or discretionary responsibility in the administration of the plan. Who selects and monitors your 401k plan provider? That is the big question. If you're involved in that decision or monitoring, you are a fiduciary and you want to be careful. Okay, I'm going to the next page. What are your fiduciary duties? Your fiduciary duty is to act solely in the interest of plan participants and their beneficiaries, with the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to them. So that includes, as a fiduciary, it's your duty to make sure that you're paying only reasonable expenses. Not the cheapest, but reasonable. You want to be carrying out your duties as a prudent expert. If you are not an expert, you definitely want to hire one. You want to follow your plan documents. If you don't know where the plan documents are, that's something that you want to get a handle on too, is know how and where to access those plan documents. You want to diversify the plan assets. That's very important with the Department of Labor, because right there what they're trying to get 401k plan providers and plan sponsors to do is really minimize the risk of large losses, the possibility of large losses for their participants. In that diversification, you also want to educate the participants regarding diversification. Let them know why the plan is diversified and how it serves them. But the duty to act prudently is very, very central to ERISA's focus. So as we move on to the next slide, we're talking about delegating fiduciary responsibility. So ERISA's original intent was for the retirement plan investments to be managed and run by experts. I think this is such an interesting statement, and it asks you to think about the defined benefit plan or the pension plan. When you think about a pension plan, which is very far away for most in this day and age, it's something that wasn't so hands-on. It was set in place and funded and kind of forgotten about beyond that. Well, there's a much more active role and a much more active role on the part of fiduciaries in this day and age. So delegating investment responsibility to outside experts really insulates the plan sponsor from both responsibility and liability. So again, if you can hire that expert, you want to know and understand why you're hiring the expert, and displace some of that liability from yourself. If investment discretion is taken away from a plan sponsor, there's no responsibility for specific investment decisions. Again, you're decreasing your liability. Have any of you ever been presented a list of funds? Maybe you've had your provider present to you a list of funds, monitored funds, and then they state that some of the funds need to be changed out. They provide you with a list and ask you to select which funds you want to be placed into the plan. That's a little bit of a dangerous path, because in making that selection, in selecting those replacement funds, you're taking such a role as the fiduciary. By delegating, plan sponsors minimize risk related to the plan and maximize wealth for participants. So if you look at that, if you're allowing for experts to choose the investments and to be responsible for those choices, they're looking, if they're coming on as your fiduciary, they're looking to have reasonable cost, to reduce the cost, and they're also looking for increased value and performance. So that's going to lend to a stronger plan and a more productive plan for the participants. Delegation to an investment fiduciary offers real value for the plan sponsor. One thing that I will throw in at this point is I talk about hiring an expert or delegating your fiduciary responsibility. The opportunities that are available there, and phrases that you may have heard before, are 321 Fiduciary and 338 Fiduciary. We're not going to see this on any of the slides, but I do want to take this opportunity to explain the difference, because it will give you guys an advantage as we move forward with the rest of the presentation. A 321 is a hired service provider that's going to provide a model lineup that's approved investment options. They're monitored, they're placed into your plan and monitored in an ongoing basis. However, in the process of monitoring, if there's anything that is falling short of the monitoring grading system, that 321 fiduciary is going to reach out to the plan sponsor and request that they make a change. So they'll give you the result of the monitoring and state, this is performing poorly, we think that you should replace this fund. That's a little tricky, because they're not going to commit to replacing the fund for you, but they've provided you with that information. So you have the information. What you do with it is up to you. But you have to be careful, because you're a fiduciary. So if you do nothing and there's maybe a vulnerability there, you're opening yourself up to even increased liabilities as a fiduciary. So you really want to be careful, and you really, really want to understand the differences. A 338 co-fiduciary, on the other hand, is also a hired service provider that acts as an investment manager. This investment manager is going to make all of the investment decisions. They're going to do all of the monitoring for you, and they're also going to replace the funds as necessary. So they'll notify you that funds have been replaced and updated, but they're not going to reach out and ask for your permission first. They're the fiduciary as far as investments go, so they're going to be proactive. What that means too is that because they're taking that role, and because they're very confident in what they're doing and in their monitoring, they also indemnify the plans if there's ever issue. So we do hear from time to time of 401k plans that have lawsuits. Walmart is one of them. We have Edison that had issues with 401k plans where participants sued for fund expense. In this case, if you have a 338 fiduciary, they will indemnify, and if ever anybody is pursuing the plan legally, they provide that representation, that legal representation for the plan, and they also indemnify any fees that may be assessed to the plan. So you truly are handing over a lot of the fiduciary liability in this situation. So I'm going to get back onto on script here, and we're going to go to the next slide, which is, again, delegating fiduciary responsibility. So forget the so-called warranty, hire the outside fiduciary. Now you guys know the difference between a 321 fiduciary and a 338 fiduciary. What's a warranty? The warranty simply means that that selection of funds has been reviewed and basically deemed suitable for your plan. Beyond that, there's not the ongoing monitoring or the ongoing assessment. It's just stating that we approve of these. 404C is not enough. 404C is when you allow your participants the ability to elect their own funds within the plan. So you would think, well, if my participants are choosing their own funds from the selection of funds we've provided, then I'm off the hook. I'm not responsible for that. Well, in an ideal world, folks, you would not be. But we're dealing with people's retirement plans in the Department of Labor and ERISA, so it's so important when you do have individuals choosing their own funds, because you are still responsible for, you really want to make sure that they have education regarding each of the funds available, because you still are responsible for those 404C funds, the funds that the individual is selecting from. Discretion is the primary trigger of fiduciary responsibility and liability. If you have discretion, if you're able to make the choices, again, that's when you're taking on liability. You can see that statement below. No discretion equals no responsibility equals no liability. And there's enough things as fiduciaries that you do have responsibility for, so where you can give up the discretion, again, and engage with the experts. That's always the suggested path to go. A named fiduciary can control and manage the operation and administration of the plan. So even if you're not in a role where you selected the plan, you're monitoring the plan, but maybe you've been indicated as a fiduciary, you still have that capacity to be able to control and manage. Okay. So as we move along, our point number 3 is you are required to understand your plan's fees, all of your plan's fees. We said a little bit earlier that ERISA, the Department of Labor, is really requesting that a plan's fees be reasonable. Again, not the cheapest fees, but reasonable. What's reasonable? You really have to look at your plan and look at it and see, what are we getting for the money that we spend? What services are we getting for the money we spend? What services do we need? How much would those services cost if we needed to bring them into the plan? So again, reasonable and cheap are very, very different from one another. It really is about, what do you need within your plan? Okay, so types of fees. There's so many fees within a 401k. I know nobody likes to hear that, but there are a lot of fees. There's explicit fees, there's implicit fees, there's administrative cost. An administrative cost is going to be your third-party administrator, who of course handles all of your compliance testing, your ADP testing, all of that good stuff that keeps you compliant. They're very active in the plan. So they would be a good value for the money spent when you think about it. Record-keeping fees. The record keeper in the plan is committing to recording, documenting, and processing transactions. They play a very active role. They're reporting to the participants, and again, they're definitely earning the fees, but you want the fees to be reasonable. Custodian, trustee fees. You have an entity that's custodian or holding those funds. You have brokerage fees. Brokerage fees are going to be more related to the cost, the transactional costs. Investment costs, you've got investment management fees, an expense ratio, you've got bid-ask spread, short-term trading fees. There's so many fees that are possible within the 401k, and it's important that, again, you review your menu of fees and understand exactly where your fees fall, how they compare with other plans around you, as well as what are we paying for. One thing that I do want to point out with expense ratio within the investment cost, your expense ratio is always going to be attached to the funds that you're utilizing within the plan. Are they expensive? How much is a fund? In a plan, you may have a range from 0.15% to 1.25%. That is a very, very broad range, and it's not uncommon to see that. In the expense ratio, part of that is the fee for managing the fund. And then another portion of that is what's considered to be the sales fee or promotion of those funds. That would be a sub-TA or 12B1 fee. And those fees really are paid for marketing that particular fund. So that might be a fee that is what they call revenue shared to the provider of your plan. And they may be receiving that extra those extra fees for simply platforming those funds and making those available within your plan. So always something to be aware of, always something to be knowledgeable about. So as we move on to the next slide, one point to make is that most of the recent litigation has been focused on plan fees. You think about that. That is where most participants are having most exposure to a 401k or a retirement plan. In the funds available, that's what they see. That's what they're connecting with, is I'm carving away a piece of my hard-earned paycheck, and I am putting it here. I'm investing it in X. So that's what they see. That's what they're looking at. That's the information that they get on their statements. So it's understandable that that would be the source of most litigation. Okay. Complaints generally allege that plan fiduciaries violated various fiduciary duties owed to the plan and its participants by, if you look at this list, permitting the plan to pay excessive fees and expenses. I don't think that anybody wants to pay excessive fees and expenses. However, that's reason for tuning in and really locating what are we paying, and really evaluating and benchmarking that level of payment. Asset fees. An asset fee is something that you want to look for, as an asset fee is something that is really another marketing fee. So that's something that you want to be tuned into. Failing to monitor fees and expenses, failing to discover, disclose, and stop hidden and excessive fees charged. Again, that's going to speak to a lot of the revenue sharing and those marketing funds that are available. Failing to know industry trends, development, practices, and policies that affects plans. You're running a business, so it's hard to really focus on everything that's happening and going on in the retirement plan industry. You've got other things that you're focused on. So I don't think that that's out of line, But then again, if you're in that position, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to your experts. And that might be your advisor, it might be your third-party administrator, it might be your record keeper. Those are the individuals that you want to reach out to and ask them, what are the trends, what are the developments, what's going on, where should I be with this plan? Failing to understand, that's something that the Department of Labor, as long as you are establishing a process regarding your plan and documenting all processes, the Department of Labor is with you. They're on your side. But failing to understand or just stating that you're not aware is never going to be a good defense with the Department of Labor. So if there's an issue with failing to understand, that's a good time again to reach out to your experts. Hire your experts or engage the experts that you work with currently. Okay, and that leads us to number 4. Ask the right questions of your service providers. So if you look at it, your service providers, your possible service providers could be an insurance company, it could be a mutual fund company, it can be a broker with investment professionals, you may have your 401k plan situated with a bank, or it may be your third-party administrator that's providing your plan to you. You have a right to ask questions of each and every one of these service providers. So not only do you have that right, but you have that duty as a fiduciary. So you always want to be focused on that and never shy away from asking the questions. Those questions would include the common misconceptions about benchmarking. So if you look at that, the things that might lead us away from asking questions of that list that we just discussed may be that we're with a leading provider, so we know that we're taken care of. We're with a big provider, a low-cost provider. It's too much work to figure that out. It's just too expensive. Or our provider does this for us. These are all things that you don't want to, you just don't want to let those things get in the way of asking the questions and benchmarking. So, facts about benchmarking. Benchmarking does require some effort, but it really isn't difficult. If you find an entity, it might be the provider you work with, it may be a competitor with the group you work with, it may be a TPA, local advisor. There's a lot of avenues for benchmarking. And typically you're going to find advisors that are focused in the 401k space, very willing and able to benchmark for you. If done properly and fully documented, it significantly reduces your fiduciary liability. That's really a key point. So you may benchmark your plan, you may make that comparison, and you want to do that. You want to do that at least every other year and have that benchmark or that comparison on file. That way, if ever you do have a visit by the Department of Labor, you have your report. You know and understand what's going on with your plan, and you can speak to it. You can provide the documentations. Benchmarking always results in a greater understanding of your plan fees, and your services. It's providing, again, that comparison. Benchmarking almost always materially lowers your costs, increases your services, and reduces fiduciary exposure. Why would that be? Most of the times, if you reach out and benchmark, especially if you reach out and let your advisor or your current provider know that you're benchmarking, it usually creates maybe that internal system to look and see and benchmark within and make the tweaks accordingly, because they don't want for you to find those surprises, those disparities that you may think your plan is costing one amount but it's costing another one, or you may think that you are receiving one service and you're really not. It's a good time to shore things up with the provider and make sure that those things are happening. Okay, Ask the right questions of the benchmarker. So we're on the next slide. So what we're really looking for is we're looking for a review of fees. Again, all of the fees and all of the related expenses. We're looking at the investments as we benchmark. Do we have best-in-class investments? Are we getting monitored reports? Are we purchasing the funds that we're utilizing at net asset value? God forbid that there be an additional sales charge or a retail sale charge that you would have if you were buying a mutual fund outside of your retirement plan. But I have to say, I have seen that before. But that should never be occurring within a 401k plan. So something to look for. The investments that are within your plan, are you limited to proprietary funds? Is it that the provider of your plan is only providing specific funds or specific fund families that limit you from other growth opportunities or possible growth opportunities? Plan provisions. Is the plan set up in the format that you compliantly need for it to be? For example, you might be a company that has businesses associated that maybe that you have subsidiaries, then maybe you need to be set up as a multiple employer plan. That would allow each entity to have their own guidelines for the plan, for their participants, but it would let each of the entities test independently of one another, which could open up a lot of opportunities for the individuals, their funding needs within the plan. Participant needs. Maybe you have a workforce that is a little bit more highly compensated. The only way that a highly compensated individual or family unit is really going to be able to get a handle on a Roth IRA is through their 401k plan. So maybe that's something that needs to be set up, a participant need that needs to be set up within your plan. Are you making sure that your participant needs are addressed, that they're comfortable and they understand their risk tolerance, and that that's how they need to invest is according to risk tolerance? Are the participants receiving education? Again, that's going to be a big focus of the Department of Labor. We're going to see more and more of the request and the requirement for participant education, which I think is a wonderful thing. That's how you're empowering your workforce. Comparison of similar types of plans. When you benchmark and you compare all of the details of plans, you want to look in your own industry and you want to look for plans of similar sizes to your own to compare with, and that would only make sense. The cost for a startup plan is going to be very different than the cost of a plan that has, say, $5 million in it. The cost of a startup, unfortunately, is going to be very expensive in comparison. So it would be very unfair to compare those two 401k units to one another. Are the investment offerings mutual funds or group annuities? We see a lot of insurance companies that offer 401k tools. That's no problem, but you just want to make sure that you're getting what you think. A group annuity can have a lot of restrictions, can have a lot of investment restrictions. It can have a lot of additional expenses too, so you always want to make sure. Can participants transfer monies out of fixed accounts without penalty? If you have that group annuity, a lot of people may be drawn to the fixed account that's available within that, but they don't realize that once they start feeling comfortable with the marketplace and want to make that move, it's going to cost them. Are there market value adjustments? Are there mortality and expense charges on top of a group annuity that aren't revealed along with the rest of the 401k fees? Always something to be aware of. Are the investment offerings proprietary? I addressed that one in one of the points above, but that is a very important thing to focus on, because if you have a company that's only offering proprietary funds, you're eliminating possible access to lower cost or maybe better value funds to your participants. And if you're doing that, why? What is the reasoning? Because again, we're the fiduciaries. Mutual funds, are the offerings active or passive? Passive is going to be buy and hold. You purchase it, you hang on for the ride. Active is going to be more in the line of a target date fund, where you select a fund based on your retirement date, and the closer you get, the more conservative that fund gets. It starts prepping your monies for retirement. What are the total fund expenses? Management, marketing fees, 12B1, sub-TA, lots of questions. Mutual funds have 30 possible funds associated with. So you definitely want to find out how many of those you're being charged. Can we get outside funds? As a fiduciary, that's something to be able to answer, to be able to focus on. So as we move along to the next slide, ask the right questions of your service providers. We continue with brokers. You want to know, how does a broker get paid? Do they get paid a flat fee, or do they get paid a percentage on the full amount of the plan? You think about that, a percentage of the plan. If an advisor or broker is getting paid on a percentage of the plan, then that means that they're benefiting when the plan is growing. So perhaps you're going to see a different kind of service in that type of engagement. How were the investments selected that you're offering? A hired fiduciary will have a documented process. So if we back up to the 338 co-fiduciary or the 321 co-fiduciary, those individuals, because they're taking on that fiduciary liability, they're going to document that process for you. Do you own dealer concessions on the fund purchases? The more that there's purchased, the higher that broker's commissions goes up. So that's just something, not a good or bad thing, just something to be aware of. Do you offer investment advice? If that individual says yes, and they're a paid broker, the broker is going to be a paid individual in the plan. That means that technically they should be signing on as a fiduciary. So you want to drill down. And if you ask them, are you a fiduciary? That's a simple yes or no question. So that should be a very point-blank answer. Okay. Banks. If you have a bank acting as a trustee, you want to know that. And if a bank is not acting as a custodian or a trustee, you really want to know why not. That's typically their role. Bank, are you an investment fiduciary? There's only 3 entities that can sign on as an investment fiduciary to a plan. That's going to be a bank, that's going to be a registered investment advisor, and that's also going to be an insurance company. And again, are the investments proprietary? So as we move on to the next slide, third-party administrators. It's important to know if they receive asset-based compensation from an investment provider. Why would that make a difference if they're receiving that? Again, that's something that the third-party administrator has specific tasks. They're handling all of your compliance testing. Are they getting paid X amount per year to handle that, or are they getting paid more and more and more as the asset grows and as the asset is continually funded, as contributions are made in an ongoing manner? Does the TPA make quadro determinations? Well, in a society where the divorce rate is at about a 50% rate, there's a probability that you will at some point encounter an individual that needs that quadro determination. You want that to be available. Do you make hardship determinations? Again, in the economy that we've had, there's many people that are needing to utilize those that hardship capacity. So you want to make sure, if that's something that you feel is important to make available to your participants, you want to make sure that your TPA team is able to do that with you. And again, TPA, will you act as a named fiduciary? With a TPA, it's not as vital that they act as a fiduciary simply because of the role that they're playing in the plan. They're a little bit more functional. Okay, so we're going to go on, I'll pick up my speed here, but we're going to go on to 5, maintain your investment policy statement. Your investment policy statement is the document, the first document that if the Department of Labor comes knocking, that's the first document that they're going to be looking for. This document really provides the guideline as to how and why you're selecting the funds that you're selecting. It really covers how you're going to monitor these funds. The investment policy speaks to these questions. So again, if you've got, it's stating your purpose and your background, your statement of objectives, your guidelines and investment policy, security guidelines, what's going to be included in the plan? Is it appropriate to have real estate investment trusts in our plan? This is going to be the policy that sets that guideline. Selection of money managers. What is a money manager? Who are they? Why would we have them? What is the philosophy of the money manager that we would engage in? Do we want a money manager that's going to play defense with the participants' money? So all of those things need to be outlined in the investment policy. Control procedures. A hired fiduciary, a hired 338 fiduciary to your plan is going to be able to provide you with the investment policy statement because that's where they're taking the fiduciary liability for you, is in the investments. Okay, and this next slide, form an investment committee and meet regularly. This is my favorite because the purpose of this committee is really to establish and exercise and to continually monitor the plan. They monitor the performance, they monitor the funds, the performance of the funds, they monitor the selection of investment managers, custodian, and advisors. They make sure that they're meeting their expectations and that they're performing as they committed to. The investment committee formalizes your process, and all of this is to be established in writing. So as they're meeting and discussing, they're documenting. All of that documentation is your best defense in a Department of Labor audit. So that brings us to the next plan, to the next slide, which really is monitor your plan. I am not going to read through each of these items line by line, but what I want you to see is that there's just such a robust list of requirements for plan fiduciaries to manage. There's a lot to be on top of and a lot to be aware of. So remember those words, delegate, and if you are not the expert or if you're not going to become the expert, to hire an expert to do these things for you. And to benchmark so that you have all of the pertinent information that you need, that you're armed with information and always armed with documentation. Excuse me. So next steps would be to schedule your inventory. You want to make sure that you have all of the proper tools and documents that you are supposed to, as a fiduciary, on file, and that you can locate those. You want to read and understand the Uniform Prudent Investor Act. And again, that's that statement that really speaks to your acting in the best interest of your participant and their beneficiaries. And you want to benchmark. You want to benchmark and make sure that you're measuring your plan at least every other year. Again, delegate. If you're not the expert, hire the expert. If you have any questions about any of these next steps, I am more than happy to get information to you, provide you with information, or help you understand what that process looks like. And at this point, we have questions and answers. If anybody has any questions out there, I am more than happy to answer.
All right, Kathy, I don't see that there is any questions. It looks like you've covered everything in full. We will have this presentation available on our website for you to view at a later date on our blog, and that will be available today and tomorrow. If you would like to join us for our next webinar on Thursday, June 20th, just look for the invitation in your email. Thank you again, Kathy.
Oh, thank you, Erin, and thank you, attendees.